It began like a moment no one expected from a man the world has spent decades calling unstoppable. Tom Cruise has jumped off cliffs, hung from planes, dangled over skyscrapers, and sprinted through more cities than most people can name. But on that night, in a room full of legends, lights, and history, he wasn't the action star everyone already knew. He was simply a man celebrating a lifetime, surrounded by people who had shaped him, challenged him, inspired him, and carried him forward. And there, right beside him, was Debbie Allen. Debbie Allen, a woman whose own legacy could fill libraries, whose choreography has sculpted decades of American entertainment, and whose presence alone can turn an ordinary night into something unforgettable. She is rhythm, she is discipline, she is elegance, and she is power. When she moves, the room pays attention. And on this night, Tom Cruise paid attention too, not as an audience member, but as someone who was pulled into the gravity of her joy. The celebration was meant to honor him. The speeches, the applause, the stories told across tables filled with history and gold, everything was aimed at Tom. After years of redefining blockbuster cinema, after decades of commitments so extreme they bordered on myth, he was about to receive an honorary Oscar. Not for a single film, not for a single year, but for the unmistakable footprint he had left across Hollywood itself. But celebrations have a way of shifting, reshaping themselves, turning into something more alive than anyone planned. And in that moment, the night wasn't about trophies or legacies. It was about the beat of the music, the pulse of the room, and the sight of Tom Cruise letting loose in a way people rarely get to see. He didn't plan it. Debbie didn't announce it. There was no stage, no choreography, no spotlight arranged. It started with a song, one of those songs that slips into you quietly and then refuses to let go. Debbie began moving first, effortless, smiling, a reminder to everyone that dance isn't taught first with the feet but with the soul. Tom laughed when he saw her. Not the polished red carpet smile, but a real, unguarded laugh. The kind that happens when a person forgets for a moment that the world is watching. Debbie reached for his hand, and he didn't hesitate. Maybe it was the warmth of the night, maybe it was the emotion of everything building toward his honor, or maybe it was just the magic of Debbie Allen herself. Whatever the reason, Tom stepped forward, and the room instantly shifted its attention. People leaned back in their chairs. Cameras paused in midair. Voices quieted. A kind of electric curiosity filled the space. Because everyone knew what Tom Cruise did on screen, but none of them knew how he danced when he wasn't acting. He moved in that same fearless energy he brings to his stunts. Not technically perfect, not rehearsed, but full of a sincerity that made it impossible not to smile. He let the music lead him. Debbie guided him with a playful confidence, and Tom followed with equal parts charm and enthusiasm. For the first time that evening, it didn't feel like the industry was honoring Tom Cruise, it felt like Tom Cruise was honoring the moment. The guests couldn't help but cheer. Some clapped along to the rhythm. Some pulled out their phones, trying to capture a few seconds of something they knew the world would eat up. But the truth is, no video could really capture that atmosphere. It wasn't just two icons dancing. It was decades of film, choreography, music, sweat, failures, triumphs, and stories dancing with them. It was Hollywood celebrating itself through two of its brightest stars. Tom wasn't trying to impress anyone. That was the unusual part. He has always been the performer, the man who gives 100%, the actor who would rather risk his life than rely on special effects. But here he wasn't performing. He was present. His shoulders relaxed. His steps loosened. There was gratitude in his movements, pride in his smile, and a certain softness that only appears when a person realizes how far they've come. As the dance continued, Debbie leaned in and said something to him, quiet, almost private. Tom laughed again, shaking his head in disbelief, the way someone laughs when reminded that the universe still has surprises left even after everything they've experienced. Maybe she said he still had rhythm. Maybe she teased him about his iconic risky business slide. Maybe she reminded him that legends, too, have to keep moving. Whatever it was, it lit something in him, and his energy rose. Minutes passed, but no one felt time moving. And maybe that's the true power of moments like this, they exist outside the clock. They become memories before you even realize they happened. When the song ended, Tom and Debbie hugged, warm and genuine. The room erupted. The applause wasn't polite. It was joyful, loud, full of admiration for a man who had, for a few minutes, stopped being a superstar and simply became human. Tom returned to his seat, cheeks flushed, still smiling. Debbie walked back with the quiet triumph of someone who knew she had just given the night its most unforgettable heartbeat. People whispered about the dance long after it ended. Some joked that Tom should add dancer to his resume. Others said they'd never seen him that free, that unfiltered. And those who had known him for decades said it reminded them of the early days, before the fame became an avalanche, before the pressure grew heavy, before every move had to be calculated. Later in the evening, when Tom stood to speak, he paused longer than usual before beginning. His voice, always steady, carried a new warmth. He spoke about gratitude. He spoke about the power of art, the people who had shaped him, the risks he had taken, the ones that paid off, and the ones that nearly broke him. And then, without naming the dance directly, he spoke of moments, those fleeting, unstoppable, perfect little pockets of time that remind us why we dedicate our lives to something bigger than ourselves. People listened, captivated. Because Tom Cruise wasn't talking as the action star. He wasn't talking as the most bankable actor of his generation. He was talking as a man who had just been reminded, through the simple joy of dancing, that he was still alive, still growing, still capable of being surprised. And that, perhaps, is why this moment will be remembered long beyond the night itself. Not because Tom Cruise danced. Not because Debbie Allen led him. But because, in that room full of legends and cameras and history, the biggest star in the world allowed himself to be small for a minute. To laugh. To move. To celebrate. To be human. And maybe that is the true legacy worth honoring.